is going on, YouTube universe? Welcome to the Hip and Shoulder, but more importantly, welcome to another edition of the Round Recap, where we sit down and reflect and discuss the prior week of AFL action. And Round 12 saw us officially hit the halfway point of the 2025 home and away season. I still can't get my head around the fact that it has come this quickly. I feel, as a collective, we wait so long for the football season, during the off-season, the trade period and the draft period. There is such a long wait for the next season to come around, and then once it's here, it goes by so incredibly quickly. Speaking of buys, it was the first round of the mid-season buy rounds, and I still don't know how I feel and sit about these buy rounds. I understand they're necessary to certain clubs and teams and being able to have a rest and a bit of a break. But obviously with the early season buys now happening because of round 0, and now we've still got Gold Coast, and Essendon still a game behind everybody else in the competition because that game got scrapped in round 0. It just throws spanners in the works left, right and centre. I still don't know how I feel about it. Let me know in the comment section down below how you guys feel when it comes to the buy rounds. But round 12, I feel, was a very big reflection on everything that has come up to this point in time of the home and away season, as far as expectations go, with some clubs exceeding and some clubs falling short of the mark. It was definitely a display of that characteristic, of that trait, and the roller coaster ride that we have been on from round 0 to this point in time very much continued in this round. So hope you guys are ready, because we're diving on in. It all kicked off on Thursday night at the Gabba with Brisbane hosting Essendon. This was a very interesting game from an outsider point of view, because we've seen Brisbane in recent weeks draw with North Melbourne and they've struggled a little bit to get out the gate, and yet we've seen Essendon somehow find a way to flip the switch on certain teams, but they're still lacking that consistency that is going to make them a contender. And I still feel very much so that while Brisbane isn't playing their best football, they are still very much within that premiership window. We just know that when the time comes, they can get the job done. Essendon, on the other hand, should be at a point in time right now with their list and the players they have and the recruiting they have done. They should be knocking on the door of the top 8. They should be playing finals football, yet they're not playing a calibre that we deem to be worthy of playing finals, which is unfortunate, because when they do look good, they move the ball really well, they hit targets, they connect well, and they're a team that thrives on bringing one another into the contest, and that is good trademarking of a great AFL team. It's just unfortunate that the consistency and lack thereof is leaving them a little bit short of the mark. This was a game that I honestly thought was dead in the water at quarter time. I thought this was just going to be your typical ABC team rocks up to Brisbane at the Gabba and they're going to get absolutely belted, because the Gabba is such a fortress for Brisbane, and when they lose, it is a rare commodity. It's a shock, because we don't really, associate Brisbane losing at the Gabba. And at quarter time, when Brisbane led Essendon 6-3 to 1-1, I thought it was lights out. I thought it was game over. I thought, here we go. This is Brisbane going to put on a 60, 70 plus point win. This is going to be a huge percentage booster for them. And then at halftime, I started to question whether or not they were taking the piss a little bit, whether they were finding a little bit of complacency in their game, because they shifted from the 6-3 in the first quarter to 7-9. They kicked 1-6 for the quarter, and it was not without lack of trying. They had plenty of the ball, but they were just, the inaccuracy forward of the ball really opened the door for Essendon to creep in. But on the same side, Essendon only managed to 3 goals themselves with all these misses. So it was one of those cases where, is Brisbane's inaccuracy going to allow Essendon to creep back into the contest? And at 3-quarter time, that was very evident, because Brisbane did lead, but it was 10-10-70, leading 9-4-58. 12 points heading into the final term. Anybody's game. We've seen Essendon in points in time where, coming into the final quarter, they can definitely put the foot down. They did do that against Richmond a couple of weeks ago. However, we know Richmond is a completely different team to Brisbane. So, it's not going to be the walkover that Essendon picked up a couple of weeks back. And then we saw them just fumble and crumble, and they managed to score themselves a further 2 for the game, but it was Brisbane finishing on top 13-12-90 to Essendon's 11-6-72. This could have been and should have been the percentage booster Brisbane wanted and needed, because Brisbane were lacking in opportunity here, and it was surprising to see that this was a game that some synonymous names that would pop up normally within a winning Brisbane lineup, they didn't contribute. I mean, the leading goal kicker for the game was Kai Lohmann. He kicked 3. Next to that was Logan Morris, who kicked 2 for Brisbane, but Peter Wright, Nick Martin, and Nate Caddy all kicked 2 for Essendon. Darcy Wilmot kicked a goal, Cam Rayner, Eric Hipwood, but then again, Todd Goldstein, he kicked a goal as well. There was a long list of goal kickers here. Charlie Cameron only kicked the 1 goal. Very surprising. I thought he would have gotten on the end of more than that. And then turning attention to the blemishes, Logan Morris kicked 3 behinds. Zach Bailey kicked 2, Dane Zorko kicked 1, McCluggage kicked 1, Darcy Fort kicked 1, Jared Berry kicked 1, Will Ashcroft kicked 1. Opportunities going begging. Very much so. And not just that on Brisbane's side, but then attention has now turned to the lack of effort from some players on Essendon's side, and some players that have been hyped up but haven't been delivering. I mean, I think it's very harsh given some of the names that have been spoken about. Isaac Kako is one of them, and he only kicked 1 behind for the game. He had 11 touches. He's been hyped up as this forward enigma that was going to change the fortunes of Essendon's forward line. Him and Nate Caddy are, touted by Kane Corns, another media personality, as a dynamic duo, and they're not firing on all cylinders. But we've got to remember, this is a kid in his first year. Nate Caddy's only played a couple, so we are still very much in infancy stages with many of Essendon's, core pieces here. This is also a contest, mind you, where Brisbane win by 3 goals against a side that were missing a lot of players due to injury. They had no Kyle Langford this game. They had no Zach Reed, who has been a pillar in defence. They had no Ben Mackay, who was their big trade-in the off-season. They're still running with Todd Goldstein as their number 1 ruck. They're having to bring in young kids to fill holes, and it's going to be a very interesting watch moving forward, because Essendon are one of those teams that I feel landed some pretty solid players in the mid-season draft, and I think we're going to see some of those players get early debuts over the coming weeks, because they have to, out of necessity, because of how much they're being impacted by injury to key personnel. And that's the main discussion point here. The key personnel they're missing. The leadership on the field that they're missing as well. It's going to be very interesting to see how they flow. I don't think they're going to be competing for finals this year. I think they're going to fall short of the mark. They're going to be one of those teams that finish 10th to 14th, maybe. Could be a bit of a hard stretch there, but reality sinks in. Injuries do hurt teams, and this is definitely an Essendon side that is being hampered by that. I feel at full strength they could have given this game a red-hot crack, and it would have been no fault to their own for Brisbane, because Brisbane failed to lock away a game that really should have been done at half-time, given the quarter-time scoreline. So all credit to Essendon for putting on a fight. Brisbane walk away with the win, though, and they continue pushing this premiership defence with a little bit of vigour. They are still not playing at their best, but they're finding ways to win. And at the end of the day, they're locking up 4 points every week. And as far as they're concerned, they're happy doing it how they're doing it. They might be happy doing it how they're doing it, but I think where Chris Fagan takes the biggest wins out of wins like this particular game is players like Josh Dunkley, Lachie Neale, weren't really getting off the chain. Dane Zorko, these names that are so synonymous with, when Brisbane are performing well, these players are the ones leading the charge. But it's players like Hugh McCluggage, Will Ashcroft, even Jasper Fletcher in this game. It's the next rung down that are really starting to step up. And I feel a little bit harsh by saying Ashcroft and McCluggage are a rung down, but I think more so they are because of the underrated nature that they run against. I mean, I think right now, Hugh McCluggage would arguably be the best midfielder on Brisbane's list, given his his ceiling given the sample size we've seen this year, but he still doesn't get spoken about enough. He doesn't get appreciated enough. So this is where Brisbane are really relishing these wins, because we get to see other players that are normally not highlighted as much highlighted, and players that normally have to carry the brunt are now getting a more even spread. This makes Brisbane incredibly dangerous when it comes to September. Friday night football, it was Collingwood taking on Hawthorn in a matchup that a lot of people, thought was going to be very tasty. A lot turned out for this game in the crowd. Collingwood, in my eyes, the number one team in the competition, coming up against the team that was touted as the premiership favourites in the preseason. And boy, are we on two opposite ends of the spectrum with these teams now, because Collingwood wasn't even near premiership conversations at all at the start of the season, especially in round 0 when the Giants absolutely bounced them. This is a team that has turned their fortunes around and is now the number one team in the comp. You can try to argue that with me. You will not persuade me to change my mind. Defensively, offensively, through the midfield, they are sound all over the board. And it is not just the young kids coming through that is adding to this, I would say, aging list, because they do have a few older players on this list, but those older players are finding new gears to run on. Sidebottom is playing absolutely insane. Pendlebury can still probably play for the next 2 to 3 years. He'll end up smashing the game's record. Older players like Tim Membry getting traded in. Some people thought that would be a bad move, but he adds something. Brodie Myercheck still adding plenty to the team. Jeremy Howe in the back line, still getting older, but he finds ways to get jobs done. Jamie Elliott, getting older, just hit a personal best, not just for himself, but for Collingwood. He is the first player since Travis Cloke back in 2013 to kick 4 consecutive bags of 5 goals in a season. That is huge. That is absolutely huge. He is on track to be All-Australian in the full forward line. This is a player that I think, if he doesn't make All-Australian, it's an absolute joke. He is the best small forward running around in the competition, if you can consider him a small forward, maybe a medium-sized forward. That small to medium deep forward threat, he's the best at it this year. That is all I'm trying to say. And I still feel Darcy Cameron in the ruck is incredibly underrated as well. We're always talking about Cherry and Gawn. Nankervis is having a big year as well. Luke Jackson is having a good year when he gets the chance to be that number one ruck. Not many people are talking enough about Darcy Cameron. I felt he was snubbed to miss the 22 or the 24 last year for the All-Australian. And I definitely feel he's probably not at the level that he was last year, but he's definitely still flying under the radar comparatively to the rest of the ruckmen in the competition. They took Hawthorn to town and they have been humbled severely, and they've fallen off a cliff, Hawthorn. They really have. This is a game where I really thought the contested ball in the midfield would be great. A established Collingwood midfield coming up against a younger Hawthorn midfield that has hunger and determination. Hawthorn's defensive line, they invested heavy in it in the off-season, so coming up against a forward line like Collingwood's, I thought that would be a great contest to watch. And this just turned into a blowout after quarter time. Quarter time, I thought we've got a great game on our hands here. It was Collingwood only leading by 4 points, 4 goals 1 to 3 goals 3. At halftime, it ballooned out to 10 goals 3 against 6 goals 3. 24 points, is still not insurmountable by Hawthorn's means at all, because we've seen Hawthorn mount big comebacks before. But at 3-quarter time, to take in a 40-point lead, 14-9, 93 to 8-5, 53, pretty much game over. You can put a line through Hawthorn at that period in time. And then the final score, 16-11, 107, defeating Hawthorn 8-8, 56. Hawthorn only managing the 3 solo behinds for that final term. Question marks are being thrown around. What's happening with Hawthorn? Collingwood are flying. We don't need to talk about Collingwood because there's nothing wrong with Collingwood right now. All the attention needs to be put on Hawthorn. And I don't know whether that's unfair to say, but given everybody jumping on them saying they're going to be premiership favourites, they're going to be contending for the flag, they have had a severe drop-off in recent weeks. And you can't say the loss of Will Day is too damaging and, he's going to turn their fortunes around on his own. Okay? Mitch Lewis not being out there? Maybe. I don't know. But all the other players for Hawthorn in other weeks, they've been able to get the job done. But when you look at the fixture and you look at the run that they've had, The only team Hawthorn have defeated currently that you would have within that top 8 kind of window is GWS. Every other team they have beaten are teams that aren't going to be playing finals this year or are going to fall just short of the mark. So they're flat track bullying, I feel, in a very, very big way. And when they play contending teams, they're fucking around and finding out. And they're finding out in big emphatic ways as well. I still feel there is some positional changes that are fucking around with Hawthorn. There are players that are supposed to be based off of, recent form in past years, should be at a level where their leadership and on-field ability should be outshining what they're doing right now. I mean, Dylan Moore's gone from an All-Australian forward to a shadow of his former self this year. James Sicily, there's a lot of conjecture around whether he's injured and he's carrying a osteopubis injury, a groin injury. I still very much feel that could be the case, and I don't know whether they're still just playing him out of necessity because he's their captain. I don't know what it is, but I definitely feel he doesn't fit in that back 6 for Hawthorn anymore. They've got Barras, they've gone and got Battle, they've got Jyath back, they've got enough key pieces back there that they don't need Sicily there. Sicily should be getting used as a forward, and I know there's some people that don't agree with that, and there was a big argument about it on Triple M Footy on the radio. Lee Montagna and some other players don't believe, or past players rather, don't believe that he is that forward figurehead for them. But even when he gets sent forward, he looks very proppy, and they're denying that there's any injury issues or whatever the case may be. But the biggest point that Lee Montagna made on the radio this week was, if putting Sicily on the sidelines now, if he does have an injury, means that within the 4 to 5 week bracket before we finish the season, he can come back and recapture some form, and then he's fresh for finals if they do make that. That's a good move to make. And until Hawthorn really look at themselves and start assessing where these problems are lying, whether there's injuries that need to be looked at, whatever the case may be, they're going to keep taking backward steps when they're playing these top teams. And the next couple of weeks, I believe they play Adelaide and they play the Bulldogs, and I think Adelaide and the Bulldogs win those games, and all of a sudden, Hawthorn have lost 5 in a row. That is absolutely huge. Absolutely huge. So while Collingwood is flying and well and truly at this point in time should be locked in as the premiership favourites, I feel they've already got one hand on the cup per se, Hawthorn start needing to figure out what the fuck's going on, and they need to bounce back big time. The first on Saturday saw the Gold Coast hosting Fremantle at People's First Stadium, and I went and made the silly comment on my tipping video last week that Gold Coast play so emphatically different when it comes to playing at People's First. They're just a different team. They're very hard to beat. But Fremantle found a way to do it, and Fremantle now have won 3 on the trot, and people in the media are starting to say that these last 3 wins have been arguably some of the best wins under this coaching regime that Fremantle have. And a lot of people have wanted to see the coaching staff shifted and changed, and they don't believe he's the man for the job. But Fremantle are starting to find a way. They are finding this consistency. I said at the start of the year, Fremantle for me coming into the finals this year would be the dark horse team to watch. And some people laughed that off, and their inconsistency before the prior 3 weeks that have gone down was something that I felt could have cost them a top 8 spot. But right now, the form they are finding, the way they are playing, the cohesiveness of the team is starting to develop and show that this is a finals contending team. I don't know whether right now they're in a position to be threatening enough for the premiership, but if they're at least playing finals, they're moving forward collectively. And they absolutely made Gold Coast fight for this game, and Gold Coast just never found a way to get back into it, I feel. I mean, it was close at halftime, but outside of that, it was Fremantle pretty much the whole way. At quarter time, they led the Gold Coast 5-3-33 to 2-1-13. At halftime, it shifted to 6-5-41, leading 5-5-35, just the singular goal. Three-quarter time, it was 9-8-62, playing 7-7-49. It was only 14 points, anybody's game. But Fremantle in the final term, stemming it out to 11-9-75, and after a little bit of a comeback late, the Gold Coast finishing on 9-10-64, falling 11 points the way of Fremantle on Gold Coast home deck. And it is wins like this that Fremantle need to pick up. I said last week that Fremantle need to pick up scalps like this when opportunity comes knocking, and winning on the road is going to build a lot of confidence within this team. I still feel where Fremantle is fundamentally struggling is positional issues. Luke Jackson is 100% Fremantle's number one ruck. They shouldn't even be fucking around with Sean Darcy in this team anymore. Sean Darcy played 50% game time, had little to no impact on the game. Luke Jackson is somebody that Fremantle severely need to lock in moving forward. If they lose him and he does come back to Victoria like all these rumours are suggesting, that is going to leave a big gaping hole that Sean Darcy is not going to be able to fill. He is not the same Sean Darcy that we know from years gone by. These injuries that have kept him off the field are starting to amount up to something. He is just not playing at the level. Having not much exposure at the level is hampering him as well. Brayshaw, back to his best. Sarong, not as impactful, but still finding ways to get job done. Jordan Clark, I feel, is in contention for All-Australian halfback, if not maybe even a back pocket. These players went to a whole new gear, and even though Fremantle won, there was still hard-fought efforts around the ground from the Gold Coast. Noah Anderson was easily best on for the Gold Coast and will get Brownlow votes for this game. Matt Rowell, I think he laid something like 13 tackles. He might not be getting monster amounts of clearances or anything else, but he is a tackling machine. Flanders struggled to get into the game early, but found a way to even get a Goal of the Year nomination by the end of the game and kicked a couple of goals. Leo Lombard, on debut, didn't really have too big of a look in, but there were some opportunities that he had where he looked good. He will grow with time. They are building something, the Gold Coast. Will they play finals this year? I feel if they drop games like this, it is going to go a long way to forcing them out of the top 8, especially with some of the teams around that 7 to 10 mark now starting to make some movements. Some people are saying that the top 6, top 7 were locks and we're only fighting for an 8th spot, but I honestly reckon there are many teams potentially out of the top 5 that are going to be vying. Maybe even the top 4. I personally have made judgment calls on who I think are the best 4 teams in the comp right now. Some people might laugh at that fact, but I feel there are very much so some spots up for grabs, and Gold Coast and Fremantle at this point in time are going to be fighting for those spots. I feel what could be a trump card for the Gold Coast is they still have a game up their sleeve to play against Essendon at the end of the year. They are still a game behind everyone else in the competition. That game could be a deciding factor at the end of the year to make Gold Coast come into the top 8 or leave them forced out if they lose. So that's going to be an interesting watch. But Fremantle just finding a way to get it done up at the Gold Coast in very, very poor conditions. I think they staved off a usually fast-finishing team really well. When that weather went to shit, I honestly thought the Gold Coast were going to get up over the top because they are a down and dirty kind of ground ball team, because Damien Hardwick thrives on that kind of play. That is his game style, that chaotic football. I really thought a downpour would play into the Gold Coast pocket, but Fremantle, surprisingly, got the job done. NG Stadium saw GWS host Richmond, and I thought this was going to be a 10-goal drubbing. I thought GWS were going to get a huge percentage booster, and this would be something that would get their season back on track, and they would find themselves in the top 8. I did not expect for 3 quarters that Richmond would be leading this game. They played out of their skin, and as a Richmond man, I felt so proud. And then I had my heart broken in the last quarter, but I'm trying to take positives out of this as much as I can. And even though we lost, to come up against a finals contending team like this, coming into the game we were expected to get absolutely belted. We faded late due to, just not having tanks built big enough within these kids yet to run out full games. We were inaccurate in front of goal. 17 behinds. We kicked ourselves out of it. We only need to convert a couple of those shots and we win this game. So as heartbreaking as it was to lose such a close contest, it still provides so much positive light for Richmond supporters to know that our kids are on track. This team is on track. I definitely feel the goal that the club has set, by 2028 that we'll be finals contending again, I definitely feel that's alive. I know some people that don't go for Richmond that believe that next year Richmond could actually be giving the finals a red-hot push because we've found kids that play certain roles, and once that cohesiveness starts to build and we have another pre-season under our belts, we could really come back. GWS just found a way to get it done in that last quarter. They turned it on, and I always knew heading into that final term, GWS weren't going to lay down and cop it as easy as they did for those first 3 quarters. They were going to turn it up, and then we're going to get the job done, and they did so on the back of players like Lockie Ash in defence, Tom Green in the middle. It was a great performance from GWS in that final term to find a way to get the job done. As I said, though, Richmond had plenty of players that went to another level. Dion Prestia came back for his first game of the year. He was huge. I felt he was one of the best on ground. Jacob Hopper was easily one of the best on ground as well, helping us win the clearance game for majority of this match. It was just deflating a little bit, and I think Adam Uze hit the nail on the head in the post-game presser. He said it felt like somebody that was dealing with a personality split in the club rooms. There were players that were so elated and some staff members that were happy because we came so close and we worked really hard, but some were just so deflated because of that loss. And I'm definitely feeling that. I'm feeling that very much so. Some performances in this game, just as I said, just make me so happy as a Richmond man. I mean, Ben Miller this year has been severely flying under the radar. He kept Jesse Hogan to 8 disposals, did not register a score for the entire game. This was a Jesse Hogan that only a few weeks ago kicked a bag of 9. So for a defender in a rebuilding team to be able to do something like that is huge. We nullified Toby Green for most of the game. We were winning the contested ball in the midfield against players like Kelly and Tom Green, and these types of players that are bulls around the contest, that love winning that clearing ball. I could be here and talking about this game all day. I really could. It's mildly frustrating that we lost, and I was very disappointed in the moment, but in reflection, I'm just happy that we're finally showing something. We're digging deep. The scoreline shows that. At quarter time, we led 6 goals 5-41 to 2-1 13. At half time, it was 7-11 53, leading 4-3 27. Now, having only kicked the 1 goal, but the 6 behinds, had we had kicked even 2 goals out of those 6 that we missed, I think that would have been too insurmountable for GWS to come back from. Coming into that final term, had we been sitting around the 9 to 10 goal mark, probably game over at that point in time. At 3/4 time, we shifted to 10 goals 16, playing 7-6 48. So again, registering 3 goals, but having a further 5 misses hurt us a lot. And then the final score, 12-8 80, defeating Richmond 10-17 77. Very upsetting. Very upsetting. And speaking of upsetting, I feel at 3/4 time, when Callan Ward went out and addressed the team, I feel that lifted GWS to a whole new level. Callan Ward has been a great servant of the AFL. He played well when he played at the Bulldogs. He was one of the inaugural players to start within the GWS lineup when the time came. And he has been one of those players that GWS have always looked up to. And he did an ACL injury. It's now been confirmed he tore his ACL. And given his history and his age, this is probably a career-ending ACL injury. They cut to footage on the bench of him very distressed, and Lockie Whitfield kind of embracing him, and they were crying. And he came out at 3/4 time, and whatever he said just revved GWS and took him to a whole new level. GWS's social media team were playing funny buggers at the end of the game because the image that they showed to celebrate the win was Tim Taranto wearing a GWS jumper, and then it was reported that Tim Taranto flew home on the same plane as Callan Ward and went as far as actually taking Callan Ward home from the Melbourne airport, making sure he was okay, he had everything he needed. It just shows the level of sportsmanship and how much Ward means to certain players. Obviously, Tim Taranto being one of those players that came through GWS's system, would have, been under, Ward's wing for majority of his time there. And just to see that really uplifts me as well. Just shows his core beliefs and standards going to a whole new level. But as upsetting as it was for GWS losing Cullen Ward, they picked up a win here, and 4 points is 4 points, especially for a team that's competing for a top 8 spot. Just upsetting that Richmond have now lost 3 games where we could have easily picked up wins. Melbourne, North Melbourne, GWS, that could have taken us to 5-6 wins for the season. For a team that was touted to not win one, that would have been huge. But to see that we're starting to be competitive in games, I'll take it. As a Richmond man as well, it makes me so much better to see that we lost by 3 points to GWS, given some of the games that followed and the losses that were impacted by these games. Sydney, Melbourne, some of these teams we're about to talk about, holy shit derailed quickly. And Sydney hosting Adelaide at the SCG, I really felt Adelaide were going to win this game. Coming into this game, they were red hot, and I really thought they were going to push Sydney to their limit. I did not think this game would be out of reach at pretty much quarter time, dead by half time, leaving Sydney supporters at a point where they were cheering for behinds being kicked. That's how bad it fucking got in this game. Adelaide demoralised them the way of 90 points. I did not think it would be this emphatic, but this is an Adelaide team that, as I said, once they start building steam, they're going to be hard to stop, and this is a team that I honestly feel has potential right now to win the premiership and finish within the top 4 at the end of the year. Make the call now at the halfway point. This team is looking impressive. At quarter time, they led 5 goals 333 to 128. At halftime, 12 goals 375, played 1-4-10. 2 points for a whole quarter of football. That is pathetic. A goal for a half of football. Pathetic. At 3/4 time, 18-4, 112, played 5-7, 37, and the final score was 21 goals 5, 131, defeating Sydney 5-11, 41. It's not just the amount of goals they're kicking, but the accuracy that has really turned up. They are now looking deadly in front of goal, and Adelaide historically over recent seasons has been a team that have let themselves down due to inaccuracy. So whatever they are working on, it is working for them. They're winning contested ball in the midfield, their forwards are firing, they're defensively sound. This is a unit that I feel is even better. Big call. I feel this Adelaide is starting to build to be better than the team that played Richmond in the 2017 Grand Final, and Adelaide were arguably the best team in the competition that particular year. Huge call, maybe, but I definitely feel this Adelaide squad is building to something huge, and it needs to be commended that it is the players that they have targeted in the off-season that aren't big names. They're not big accumulators of the ball. They're not getting 30 plus a week. They are role players that get down and dirty and get the job done. And as far as earmarking some of those players, the 3 that are going to be mentioned later in the video when it comes to my votes for this game might shock a few, but I think when you have a look at how they played and how they have impacted this team this year, all 3 of these players, regardless of whether they came in this year or, years gone by, they're all playing roles that have made Adelaide so undeniable this season. This team is exciting to watch. Was a team that had players like Isaac Rankin not do too much at all. Jordan Dawson still did enough. Rory Laird didn't really have much impact at all, but they're still getting involved. They're getting their teammates into the action. They are playing team-based football, and they look good doing it. Sydney, on the other hand, don't know what's going on. We've spoken about their forward line being haphazard and not having any Tom Papley running around, not having any of Joel Amati, not having any of, Logan McDonald, these types of players. Are these players really hurting Sydney so much that they're losing this bad? Errol Goulden, I feel, is probably their biggest loss. I just don't know. I'm just left at a point right now where I really don't know what to say or how to say it, because there is very few names really putting their hands up for Sydney every week in this particular team wanting to get the job done, outside of maybe Chad Warner, and even he's lacking consistency this year. Isaac Heaney isn't anywhere near the player he was last season. Rowbottom's still a good role player. Brodie Grundy was probably their best in this game, and that in itself is saying a lot. So, sorry, Sydney fans, not much to talk about for you in a positive light this week, but if you're an Adelaide fan, holy fuck were you guys good to watch. Up at TIO Traeger Park, Northern Territory, everybody thought, including myself, that this was going to be a whitewash and Melbourne were going to run all over the top of St Kilda, because when it comes to playing at grounds like this, Melbourne come into their own. They really do. They relish opportunities like this, and I thought this was going to be a done and dusted job by quarter time, and it very much was. The way of St Kilda. St Kilda just rocked up and played out of their skin, and at the start of the game, my old man, who is an avid St Kilda supporter, turned around and said, I think we can give it a red hot crack today, and I kind of laughed internally, really loud and really deeply. But yeah, I think he had the last laugh, because St Kilda was so impressive in this game. They just pulled something out that we haven't seen from them in a while. On the radio, they were referring to it as a Ross Lyon masterclass. I know that's a kind of like tongue-in-cheek thing that they like to talk about, but looking at the scoreline, it shows just how good St Kilda were from start to finish. Quarter time, 6-2-38, St Kilda led Melbourne's 2-2-14. At halftime, it was 9-4-58, leading 6-9-45. Back to 14 points after having a huge lead. It was at that point that I thought maybe this is where Melbourne start mounting something here. Maybe St Kilda got an early jump, but they're going to fumble this. At three-quarter time, it was St Kilda's 11-6-72, leading 7-13-55. And then, at the end of the game, it was St Kilda's 14-7-91, leading Melbourne's 7 goals 21-63. After half-time, Melbourne kicked 1 goal and 12 behinds. Yeah, you're not mishearing me. I'm saying what I said. That was absolutely huge. We need to break it down to the player stats here to see who the culprits were. And I think some of them will rue opportunities here. Xavier Lindsay kicked 3 behinds. Jake Melksham kicked 2 behinds. Doug McVie kicked 2 behinds. Daniel Turner kicked 1 behind. Harry Sharp kicked 1. Salem kicked 1. Petty kicked 1. Petrarca kicked 1. Laurie kicked 1. Aidan Johnson kicked 1. Max Gawn kicked 1. And Cade Chandler kicked 1. Some of those were very gettable. A couple of the shots from Xavier Lindsay should have gone through. Judd McVie missed both and should have very much gone and kicked both of those. Jake Melksham should have kicked one of those too. And those shots kind of shift momentum quite a bit. But at the end of the day, it was St Kilda winning by 28 points. They looked like they might have been missing Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira at early portions of this game. Copped a errant shoulder by Aidan Johnson and copped him in the head. He went off for his 15 minutes assessment and came back onto the ground all clear, but made 5 or 6 poor decisions and easy turnovers and fumbles and things that not many people would associate with Wanganeen-Malira. And that kind of alarmed me a little bit, that maybe he might have passed the test, but maybe he didn't pass the test, if you know what I'm saying. I thought he was maybe a little bit underdone. Made some very poor decisions that led to Melbourne being able to convert, or at least find opportunity to attempt to convert. Aidan Johnson has been slapped with a 2-week ban because of that hit. Probably lucky. If he failed that concussion test, he was probably looking at 3 to 4 weeks. I don't think you can contest the hit. I think they just copped the 2 weeks sweet. And Mateus Philippou came off with a leg injury early in the game. Now, I don't know whether or not it has been reported as to what injury it was. They were unsure at that point in time. I'd be disappointed if I look here and it says it's just a leg injury. It is a calf injury that he came off with. They weren't sure whether or not it was a hamstring, if it was a quad, but they've reported it as a calf, which is upsetting because he's obviously missed a period of time due to injury. He's already been named to come back into the team earlier in the year and then dropped out of it, and he's come back and he's injured already. So upsetting, because they had a good role plan for him this year and he's a great young talent, and it's never good to see a player go down with injury. They had just over 6.7 thousand, so 6,721 people turned up, and that's a good number for a game up at Northern Territory. That's pretty solid, and it's good to see players like that turning out for games like this. Getting exposure to games and grounds like that is huge for our game. And it's good to see these clubs come out and, at least for St Kilda, relish the opportunity to play at a crowd like that. Melbourne, bitterly disappointing given their standards, and I thought they had really turned their favour around this year after a terrible start, but they reverted backwards rather quickly. Final game of the round, given that it is a bye round and we had 4 teams miss, it was West Coast hosting Geelong at Optus Stadium, and I thought this was going to be an absolute bloodbath. It ended up being a very big win to Geelong in the end, but this was a game that West Coast always hung around for. At quarter time, it looked like it could have been dead, but they just found ways to keep stemming the flow. Geelong led 4-5-29 to 2 goals straight 12 at the first break. Going into halftime, they had an 11-point lead, 8-7-55, leading 7-2-44. At three-quarter time, it was 10-9-69, leading 9-4-58. Again, only that 11-point differential. But at the end of the game, it was Geelong 17-14, 116, defeating West Coast 11-7-73. In the final term alone, Geelong skipped out to kick 7 goals 5, with West Coast only managing to score the 2 goals 4. A huge game, I feel, for West Coast in the way of showing that they can at least be competitive for 3 quarters of football against a team that is truly pushing for a premiership tilt. Up until three-quarter time, Ruben Jinby had done a great lockdown job on Jeremy Cameron. In that final term, though, Jeremy Cameron did finish with 5 goals. So he found a way to get off the chain late, which helped stem this huge gap. So you can't really understate here how well West Coast did play. They found ways to get jobs done. Bailey Smith, at half-time, regardless of disposal efficiency, looked like he could go 40, 50 disposals in this game. Got played on with a lockdown role in that second half and managed to kind of stem the flow a little bit. He finished with 38 disposals, but I mean, given the fact that he looked like he was going to go much larger than that, and he had only a handful of disposals in the third, he managed to get some easier ones in the final term when Geelong started skipping away with the game. I felt West Coast were finding ways to get jobs done. Oscar Allen stood up and needed to with the absence of Jake Waterman, and he kicked 3 or 4. I think he kicked 4. If I'm not mistaken. I'll have to have a little cheeky look here just to verify. I'm pretty sure he kicked 4. Jack Williams stood up and kicked 2. They just found ways to stay in the hunt and to find the football and to get each other involved. Unfortunately, it was just an avalanche in that final term that opened up. And it could be very similar to the way Richmond kind of faded against GWS here. It's a young team that is still building a cohesive set of chemistry under a new coach. They're trying to understand new game plans. Players that might not have tanks built big enough to outrun a 4-quarter effort. But I, as a neutral supporter, was infinitely impressed by what West Coast did here. These are outings that, you know, if you lose, but you still put on a decent showing and show that, you know, these kids are building something, it gets home teams and, you know, supporters excited. As a Richmond man, as I said earlier, we lost to GWS, but I can see so much positives to take out of that game. I feel West Coast fans have a lot to take out of this game as well, as disappointing as it is, because heading into this game, anybody would have thought Jeremy Cameron's going to kick 10 goals. Even on the radio, they said that Jeremy Cameron will probably kick between 8 to 10 goals in this game. He didn't get off the chain until the game was pretty much dead, and he kicked some late goals in quick succession. If you look at the breakdown of the game that talks about when the goals were scored, it's not until you have a look at the late kind of push that Geelong had that the goals started coming thick and thin. Like in the 30th minute of the final term, that's when Cameron kicked his 5th goal. And before that, it was probably halfway through the 4th term where he kicked a couple prior. So very much kept under wraps. At the end of the day, Geelong just find a way to get the job done. Similar position to what Brisbane do. And they're banking 4 points. They find a way. And it's, again, similarly to what I said about Brisbane, it's the next string of players underneath that don't get spoken about near enough that really start to stand up tall in these games. I mean, Tom Atkins in the midfield had 10 tackles for the game. Brian Myers had 13 marks and had a lot of score involvements. You talk about the inefficiency of some disposals, but Bailey Smith still had 38 disposals. Jeremy Cameron, he kicked 5 goals. When you have a look at the other stats around the ground, score involvements, Jeremy Cameron, he kicked 5, but he had 10 score involvements, so he found a way to get involved as well. It's just very, very cohesive, a group that Geelong are building here, and I feel a lot of people understated how big an acquisition Bailey Smith was going to be. I didn't think he would be that big that we were talking Brownlow fancies, because he would well and truly have to be within the top 3 players pushing for a Brownlow halfway point right now. I think it's probably Nick Dacos, Bailey Smith, and you can arm wrestle between Jordan Dawson or Andrew Brayshaw. I think that's your top 3, and I would probably throw Noah Anderson in as a smoky for your top 5. Geelong just they look, when they're so turned on, they look good. They look so deadly. It's just very, very hard to get to terms with the fact that Geelong just keep finding a way to remain relevant and to be as good as they are. As I did say, this was the beginning of the bye rounds. So Port Adelaide, Carlton, North Melbourne and the Western Bulldogs all sat round 12 out. And with round 12 now in the books, this is how the AFL ladder looks at the halfway point of the AFL season for 2025. We have Collingwood in first place on 40 points, just ahead of Brisbane, who are in second place on 38. They are tied for the same amount of wins, but that draw that Brisbane had is really going to come back and bite them in the arse, I feel, when it comes to pushing for that top 4 place, because there are some teams hot on their tail. Adelaide have moved up to 3rd place, the Gold Coast have dropped down to 4th, and Geelong sitting in 5th, all equally sitting on 32 points. We then have Hawthorn in 6th, and GWS who have moved up to 7th, with Fremantle who have shifted to 8th, all on 28. Out of that top 8 currently, I feel the top 4 will finish as Collingwood, Brisbane, Adelaide and Geelong. I just feel currently they are the best 4 teams in the comp. Those are my top 4. I feel anybody underneath that can potentially drop out of the top 8 at any point in time. There's a couple of games gap between some of these teams, but worse things have happened in recent years. So very good, very interesting to see how that battle for top 8 is going to shift. But sitting out just outside of the top 8, the Bulldogs have dropped down to 9th, and we've got Essendon in 10th, both on 24 points. St Kilda shifting up to 11th, and Melbourne dropping down to 12th. They are both on 20 points. We have Carlton, who have dropped to 13th, Sydney, who have dropped to 14th, and Port Adelaide, who still sit in 15th, all on 16 points. Richmond in 16th on 12 points, North Melbourne in 17th on 10 points, and West Coast in 18th place on 4 points. With all the business stuff out of the way, we now turn attention to the good stuff, the discussion points, the parts where I can impart my own objective decision making. This is where we talk about my votes for round 12 when it comes to the 2025 Hip and Shoulder MVP Award, and my selections for the round 12 Team of the Week. If you've seen these videos before, you know exactly how this is going to play out, but if you might be new around here, the MVP Award is a Brownlow vote system, 3-2-1, and at the end of the season, whoever's got the most votes, I have crowned as who I feel has been the best player over the course of the 2025 season. And we adapted the Team of the Week this year because there are players that are going to miss out on votes but could have played out of their skin and are deserving for some kind of recognition, and it creates yet again another point of discussion, because my selections might be different to your selections at home, whether it is the voting for the MVP award or the selections for the Team of the Week. So again, if you ever agree or disagree with any selections I make, let's talk about it in the comments down below. But we're kicking this one off, as we always do, with the votes for the MVP award for round 12, and it all kicked off on Thursday night with Brisbane hosting Essendon. 1 vote, Jasper Fletcher. 21 disposals, 17 kicks, 4 handballs, 12 marks, 1 tackle, 1 clearance, 345 metres gained, 1 goal, and 3 score involvements. 2 votes, Jai Caldwell. 30 disposals, 16 kicks, 14 handballs, 4 marks, 8 tackles, 10 clearances, 334 metres gained, 1 goal, and 6 score involvements. Best on ground, 3 votes, Hugh McCluggage. 41 disposals, 20 kicks, 21 handballs, 11 marks, 4 tackles, 7 clearances, 557 metres gained, and 12 score involvements. Collingwood versus Hawthorn. 1 vote, Ned Long. 24 disposals, 8 kicks, 16 handballs, 4 marks, 11 tackles, 3 clearances, 245 metres gained, and 10 score involvements. 2 votes, Jamie Elliott. 12 disposals, 9 kicks, 3 handballs, 5 marks, 2 tackles, 222 metres gained, 5 goals, and 10 score involvements. Best on ground, 3 votes, Nick Dacos. 32 disposals, 16 kicks, 16 handballs, 7 marks, 6 tackles, 4 clearances, 496 metres gained, 1 goal, and 10 score involvements. Gold Coast versus Fremantle. 1 vote, Luke Jackson. 27 disposals, 12 kicks, 15 handballs, 2 marks, 7 tackles, 21 hitouts, 4 clearances, 373 metres gained, and 5 score involvements. 2 votes, Noah Anderson. 39 disposals, 22 kicks, 17 handballs, 4 marks, 1 tackle, 12 clearances, 840 metres gained, and 8 score involvements. Best on ground, 3 votes, Jordan Clark. 30 disposals, 24 kicks, 6 handballs, 6 marks, 4 tackles, 5 clearances, 813 metres gained, and 3 score involvements. GWS versus Richmond. 1 vote, Jacob Hopper. 29 disposals, 15 kicks, 14 handballs, 3 marks, 2 tackles, 13 clearances, 492 metres gained, 1 goal, and 5 score involvements. 2 votes, Dion Prestia. 31 disposals, 15 kicks, 16 handballs, 2 marks, 5 tackles, 7 clearances, 381 metres gained, 1 goal, and 9 score involvements. Best on ground, 3 votes, Tom Green. 30 disposals, 14 kicks, 16 handballs, 3 marks, 7 tackles, 6 clearances, 567 metres gained, 1 goal, and 7 score involvements. Sydney versus Adelaide. 1 vote, Isaac Cumming. 21 disposals, 16 kicks, 5 handballs, 5 marks, 3 tackles, 1 clearance, 402 metres gained, 2 goals, and 6 score involvements. 2 votes, Mark Keane. 23 disposals, 21 kicks, 2 handballs, 10 marks, 2 tackles, 514 metres gained, and 2 score involvements. Best on ground, 3 votes, Alex Neil Bullen. 25 disposals, 14 kicks, 11 handballs, 6 marks, 4 tackles, 352 metres gained, 1 goal, and 6 score involvements. Melbourne versus St Kilda. 1 vote, Dan Butler. 12 disposals, 9 kicks, 3 handballs, 3 marks, 169 metres gained, 4 goals, and 7 score involvements. 2 votes, Marcus Windhager. 28 disposals, 18 kicks, 10 handballs, 8 marks, 4 tackles, 5 clearances, 492 metres gained, and 5 score involvements. Best on ground, 3 votes, Callum Wilkie. 31 disposals, 22 kicks, 9 handballs, 15 marks, 2 tackles, 1 clearance, 312 metres gained, and 2 score involvements. West Coast versus Geelong. 1 vote, Jeremy Cameron. 14 disposals, 12 kicks, 2 handballs, 7 marks, 3 tackles, 351 metres gained, 5 goals, and 10 score involvements. 2 votes, Brian Myers. 26 disposals, 21 kicks, 5 handballs, 13 marks, 3 tackles, 1 clearance, 552 metres gained, 2 goals, and 9 score involvements. Best on ground, 3 votes, Bailey Smith. 38 disposals, 27 kicks, 11 handballs, 7 marks, 4 tackles, 5 clearances, 834 metres gained, 1 goal, and 8 score involvements. And at the end of round 12, this is how our top 3 looks for the 2025 Hip and Shoulder MVP award. In 3rd place, tied on 18 votes, we have Adelaide's Jordan Dawson and Gold Coast's Noah Anderson. In 2nd place on 20 votes, we have Geelong's Bailey Smith. And in first place on 21 votes, we have Collingwood's Nick Dacos. And with the votes out of the way, we can now turn attention to Team of the Week, which was a bit hard to piece together. I'm still trying to find my feet when it comes to this. There were some players in certain positions that I feel were stiffed in this particular round, but with so many players performing well in these positions, it's always going to be hard to select the right one. So again, if you guys agree, if you disagree, let's talk about it in the comment section down below. Bear in mind as well, I have had some people talk about it in the past, with my sub selection, it is never going to be an actual sub. It is just an extra fifth player that I couldn't fit in on the bench, but I felt was good enough to be mentioned, and I'm using that as my sub. I can do it because it's my kind of thing. So let's dive into it. Team of the Week, round 12. Across the back line, we have Lockie Ash and Jordan Clark in the back pockets, with Ben Miller at full back. Across half back, we have Max Holmes and Lockie Whitfield on half back flank, with Callum Wilkie at centre half back. Across the middle, we have Bailey Smith and Hugh McCluggage on the wings, and Tom Green in the centre. Across half forward, we have Ben Keys and Brian Myers at half forward, and Oscar Allen at centre half forward. Deep in the forward line, we have Josh Rochelle and Jamie Elliott in the forward pockets, and Jeremy Cameron at full forward. Luke Jackson gets back-to-back weeks in the ruck, with Nick Dacos as ruck rover and Noah Anderson as rover. The interchange is made up of Jacob Hopper, Marcus Windhager, Dion Prestia, and Ned Long. Dan Butler finds himself as this week's sub, and Matthew Nix finds himself as Coach of the Week after the 90-point win that Adelaide picked up against Sydney at the SCG. And that is it, ladies and gentlemen. The round has been officially recapped. I thank you, as always, for joining me for these types of videos and all the other content that I make. I hugely appreciate it. You can continue to show your love and support by hitting that like button down below. As I mentioned, if you agree, if you disagree with decisions I make and talking points that we discuss, let me know in the comment section down below. I love talking to each and every one of you guys. And if you want to get on board the community we are building together here, consider hitting that subscribe button as well. But that's it from me, guys. I'm out of here, and as always, I will catch you guys next time.